Hello, everyone in the Emerson Group community. Welcome to our wealth call here for September 2023. My name is Nick Emerson, CEO and owner of the Emerson Group, Real Estate Professionals, where we specialize in helping income property owners buy, sell, and reinvest by using the 1031 exchange strategy. Today's call is filled with a lot of great information and reliable education for you guys so that you can make smart decisions within the real estate investment space. Today we're going to be going over deep into the 1031 exchange motivators, right? What motivates investors to consider and ultimately take action on completing a 1031 exchange. So through this information, I put together case studies of clients that we've worked with through the years, so I can help give you a better, more deeper understanding of what this actually looks like in the form and function of doing it. So my goal is that in hearing this and viewing this information, you might unlock or uncover an opportunity within your own real estate investment portfolio of ways in which you can better your position than what you currently have and for your future legacy. So without further ado, let's get started into the 1031 exchange motivators. I'm going to make sure that I deliver everything you've ever hoped for in this call, and we're going to make sure that we get you locked in here to this beautiful PowerPoint. So 1 second here. Before we get started into the motivators, I want to just do a quick little recap of what a 1031 exchange is, some of the basics for a refresher. So what is a 1031 exchange? A 1031 exchange is a transaction which permits an investor to defer the payment of capital gains by exchanging real property for like-kind real property of equal or greater value. In layman's terms, really a 1031 exchange is your ability to sell an investment property, reinvest tax deferred into another investment property. Now, this can be investment property held for rental or for income. It can also be a property held for the use of business. So what's most important is the function of the asset, not the type of asset, right? As long as this property is investment or held for business use, it qualifies for a 1031 exchange. The other nuance I wanted to go over is, what is a real property? Well, a real property, of course, is brick and mortar, but also understanding that real property can be more than just brick and mortar per the definition for the IRS, right? Real property could, in sense, be resources originating directly above and below the land. So in other words, you could, in essence, 1031 exchange into oil rights. You could 1031 exchange into a fractional ownership, right? So these aren't necessarily brick and mortar that you're holding, but they are real property for the purposes of conducting a 1031 exchange. The next thing I wanted to get into is, what can you exchange into? Oftentimes what I hear from people is they believe that they can only go from a single family to a single family or a condo to a condo. What's amazing about the 1031 exchange space is that you can 1031 exchange into a multitude of options, as you can see here, right? We have single family, townhome, vacant land, multifamily, industrial, billboards, windmills. There's a lot of opportunities, even businesses, right? So the opportunity here is amazing as far as what you can and cannot do. And a lot of people don't know about this. So once seeing this, it helps uncover and unlock other potential considerations you may not have otherwise thought of. Exchange motives, cash flow. Non-performing assets or assets that are performing below market rate of return, right? To me, that's a non-performing asset, or lower performing is, how am I comparing to what I could get in the market today? Typical culprits that'll be in this category oftentimes are vacant land, because naturally there's typically not a cash flow associated with it, but you are paying out every year for property taxes. Improper leverage, right? This is a case where maybe you have a really high equity position, and therefore, because your equity has risen so much relative to your debt, the return starts to regress or go down over time. Another one might be you have an older property that just needs a lot of deferred maintenance and work, right? So you're looking at spending tens of thousands of dollars on a roof, windows, kitchens, plumbing, electrical, right? All those things, foundation. you don't want to take money out of your pocket, right? If you could reinvest it without any money out of your pocket, that would be the ideal outcome. High vacancy rates. Maybe you have a property that, for whatever reason, maybe it's really small or really big, and therefore presents a problem with turning over and getting new tenants. Or maybe it's in a rural location, right? Maybe it's a property that you had inherited from family, or maybe you bought to live in, and for whatever circumstances, it's now become a rental property, right? This is a pretty common culprit of, it was a property that we never really intended for it to be an investment property, and yet here we are 20 years later, and it's a bona fide investment for our portfolio. So oftentimes those are ones that we haven't looked at for a while, looking at them, understanding what am I generating and what is my opportunity. Getting into the first case study, from profit to performance. So Travis and Michelle worked with them in 2014 to purchase a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo here in Allied Gardens. Great place, newer construction, easy bread and butter as far as turning it over and getting it rented. However, when they bought the property, they had used a 15-year loan. So the intention from the beginning was really to build equity in the property, not necessarily generate a cash flow. As you can see here in the considerations, the net operating income was actually $3,000 a month negative, right? So they were realizing no return or a negative return. Now, the flip side of that, though, is that in sitting down with Travis and Michelle in 2021, we're able to identify that they benefited from an appreciation rate of 9.7% per year. That's pretty phenomenal. And nearly 60% since they bought it in 2014. So their equity at purchase was $66,000. Looks like I gave you guys a multiple choice or fill in blank here, equity at sale. For the purpose of this, they had an equity of over $212,000 to reinvest. So they almost 400% quadrupled their equity in this position over that 7-year period. And really what we were trying to identify is, should we re-rent this unit and stay the course? Or what would be an option if we wanted to improve the cash flow of their current equity position? In going through this process, Travis and Michelle, I was able to connect them with 3 different agents in 3 different markets: Arizona, Florida, and Alabama. Through that process, they were able to understand what are the market opportunities there, what type of returns can they expect, and why would someone want to buy properties in that area as far as rental demand goes. In going through that education process, Travis and Michelle decided that they wanted to evaluate and buy properties in the Alabama area, Huntsville or greater area. So with that, we sold their property here on Mission Gorge, and we helped buy 3 properties in the Alabama area with our partner, Rob Abercrombie, in the Huntsville area. Thanks, Rob. And what I really want you to take away from this image here is the change in their situation from taking action, right? They chose to evaluate where they're at, what they could do, and by doing so, they changed their position from negative $3,000 each year in cash flow to positive $24,136. That's a net difference of $27,000 plus in year 1. I don't know about you, but I certainly would appreciate if I made a position change that generated $27,000 without me having to actively go earn it. Now, the other thing I wanted to share with you is that a lot of people talk about doing an exchange. They talk about looking at year 1. We want to see, well, what does this look like 30 years from now? So this is an amazing table to really give you a sense of what does the position look like over the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? So what we're looking at is the annual net cash flow, right? So owning the condo here in San Diego, in year 10, $14,241 versus Alabama of $36,374. And at the bottom here, you can see the difference between the 2 outcomes. It's substantial every single year. Secondly, I think the most important thing I also wanted to acknowledge here is that I thought San Diego, being an appreciation state, would be, well, making Alabama look like a bad choice from that standpoint. However, in buying 3 properties which is much like a mutual fund effect, right? We have 3 doors instead of 1. What was interesting is that it actually outpaced the San Diego market during the same time period over the past 2 years as far as appreciation goes. Also, as you look at the property value on the right-hand side here, you'll note the tremendous difference in outcome at the end here, right? We're talking about a value of the property 30 plus years from now. You can see the difference here. We're talking about in excess of $1 million+ here. So by choosing to take this position and change it into the 3, they now have an opportunity to walk away with a net worth they can pass on to their kids that's going to be in the multitude of millions of dollars. So it's a really profound impact over the course of time by choosing to make changes, or at least evaluating where you are and what your opportunity is. Exchange motives, depreciation. One of the lesser known benefits of using a 1031 exchange is the ability to exchange your fully depreciated property into a higher value property. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, because depreciation is essentially cash flow at the end of the year. And what I mean by that is depreciation allows you to offset your income for your rental property. Therefore, you don't realize a tax effect because of that depreciation write-off. Now, I wanted to go through from a depreciation standpoint, what are some of the schedules available to you? Well, in residential, that would be 1 to 4 unit properties. You have a straight line method of 27.5 years. Commercial, you're looking at 39 years. And then I also wanted to include there is an accelerated depreciation method that can also be used, notified as the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System, or the MARS. So there's a lot of different nuances depending on what type of property you have or the strategy you're going after. But what you need to understand is that depreciation does matter, and it does impact your net worth and your net operating income each year. So a lot of clients oftentimes in this category, right, have properties that they have owned for 10, 20, 30 plus years, and they no longer have any basis on the property. So I kind of want to give you an example of what would this look like from a hypothetical scenario of what if someone bought a property here in San Diego in 2006? What does it look like from a number standpoint, right? So in San Diego, the land and improvement or the property allocation is typically going to be around 35 to 65% rather. So 35% for the land, 65% for the improvements. Now, that's important because depending on where the property is in the United States, that allocation might be lower or higher. For instance, I own a property in North Carolina, and my CPA has allocated a 25% land allocation and a 75% improvement. So depending on where you're at, right, you might have a larger improvement percentage, which means you can write off more of that asset. So for this example, we allocated 65%, which is equivalent to 422,500. We divide that by 27.5 years, and we have a 15,363 annual depreciation write-off. Right, so after 17 years, we fast forward to today, we have depreciated a total of 261,171. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you had not had that depreciation, and let's assume that you were in the 24% tax bracket, let's say that during that same time period, your net income was equivalent to your depreciation. We're talking about in excess of $75,000, right, that you would have otherwise had to pay in additional taxes per se, had you not had that offset. So in this example, 10.5 years are remaining on the depreciation schedule or your adjusted basis, right? So it's the equivalent of 161,329. Once you fully depreciate the asset, you have a 0 cost basis. So the only tax offset you have after depreciation table is gone is if you choose to make additional capital improvements to the property, such as adding square footage, putting on a new roof, changing out plumbing system. But the caveat with that is that requires you to take money out of your pocket and spend it, right? And ideally, if we can keep money in our pocket and generate more money from the money that's out there, That's the ideal situation we want to find ourselves in. So at the bottom here, what I wanted to really show you guys is just what does all this mean from a numbers and dollars standpoint? Well, if you no longer had the 15,363 write-off here for depreciation in this example, and you were in the 24% tax bracket here in 2023, you'd be looking at an additional tax bill of $3,687.12, right? Or $307 a month is basically what your negative would be. So it's important to understand this, right? Because a lot of people will look at a property they've had a really long time. They say it's a cash cow, but they're not realizing all the benefits of rental property or investment property, right? They're not getting some of these offsets. And so understanding everything from a big picture is really what I want people to understand from this motivation of depreciation. The second thing is other people have a right to use accelerated depreciation. And so what they can do is rather than focusing maybe 100% on cash flow, if they're in high income earning years, right, they can use, if they qualify, an accelerated depreciation method or a cost segregation study, as they call it. Through the cost segregation study, I'll use one of my properties as an example. I'll be writing off approximately $42,000 in 2022. Right, that's going to save me over $18,000 in taxes. If I save $18,000 in taxes, well, that's equivalent of making a cash flow in excess of $1,000 a month. So understand the bigger picture of the cash in, cash out. A lot of us, we just want to focus on the cash that we have in our hand that's coming in every month, but we're not looking at all the different aspects of the property and how we can realize the best outcome from a net worth and a net operating income long term. Exchange motives, appreciation, selling real estate in the lower appreciating market and moving it into a higher appreciating market. Now, I first wanted to show you guys for fun a quick example of what were some of the top 3 highest appreciating markets in the past 5 years, and maybe what some of the lower appreciating markets were. To my surprise, Idaho came in at number 1 at 121% appreciation, followed by Utah and Arizona. The lowest appreciation, as you can guess, well, they happen to be located in some of the least populated states in the US. North Dakota, Alaska, and Louisiana. Louisiana being the exception, of course. So really what I want to ask yourselves during this example of appreciation and what that motivation might be for an exchange is, what am I looking for as far as my investment benefit here in the next 5 years, the next 10 years? Where am I at in the season of investing, right? Am I at a place where I need income, I need cash flow to help supplement my cost of living or my lifestyle? Or am I at a place where I no longer need cash flow, right? I prefer appreciation where it's something long-term, I can create more equity and use that to fund a legacy item, maybe help one of your kids or in the family. So really just understand where you're at, what you have from your portfolio investments, and whether it's still serving you where you're currently at from where you might have been when you bought it. The last thing is, what do I need from an income or long-term approach as far as, am I needing income here in the next couple of years, or is it more important that really I don't want the income because it's going to mean more taxes for me? I'd rather just have my money out there working for me in the form of generating equity that I can use at a later date with an exchange. Therefore, you don't have to worry about taxes. In this example, we're going to do a case study on the niche versus the net. And what I mean by that is helping clients Don and Sandy out back in 2021. So Don and Sandy owned a condo here in Nobel Drive in the UTC area. Now, this building was unique in that it's a 62 plus senior living community. So in this particular instance, the building was only able to be financed with cash 99% of the time, right? So there's no FHA, conventional, VA, there's none of those options available in this building. Additionally, you have the age restriction. And then also, because it is a assisted living community, they do come with meal plans and amenities. And therefore, your monthly fee to own in this building is in excess of $2,000 a month. So this is a great example where Sandy and Don inherited the property. It was never merely meant to be a rental property, but it had been rented out for a long period of time. What was important to them is they didn't want to be locked into this property where it was really subject to economic conditions. What I mean by that is throughout the course of the past decade, values in that building were really volatile, right? They could be up or down. And if they were down, they were way down. And if they were up, they were way up. But being where they are in the season of life, they didn't want to be in a position that was so volatile. So what we were able to do is sell that property for them, connect them with Johnny Williams in the Fort Worth, Dallas area there in Texas, and identify a duplex that they could reinvest this money into. Now, this helped in a multitude of ways because one, they own the property and had multiple beneficiaries. So they're able to get out of that position and have their own investment options. Two, they were able to actually realize more income. But three, what's most important for this example is the appreciation. So Don and Sandy sold the property in 2020 and they sold the property for $515. What's interesting to note here is that 2 years later, their same property sold for $425. So this is a great example. We were in a fully appreciated growth market here in San Diego, yet their condo in those 2 years went down almost 100,000. Exactly why we did what we did. Now, looking at it just from comparing apples to apples, I looked up the property on Redfin just to get a ballpark figure, grabbed 575. I looked up their duplex, grabbed 517. And what we're really focusing on is what appreciation did each unit realize from when they sold the property. Happy to report that, as you can see, their appreciation benefit was 112%, meaning rather than appreciating 60,000, it appreciated 127,000, right? That's over 2 times greater than the 60,000. So not only did we realize a better outcome and a more stable growth environment for them for appreciation to be realized, they also improved their net operating income standpoint from a cash flow. So as you can see here, we really were able to put together a plan, help them reinvest, establish the right market for them, and have a best possible outcome had they not done something versus had they did. So it's important to understand where you're at and what you might want to be putting together, even if it's not now, right? These are conversations I have with Don and Sandy several years in advance of them actually doing it. And as you can see, they planned, we put together a strategy, and they created a great solution with a tremendous outcome. So be thinking to yourself, is there a property that I own that maybe I inherited that was never meant to be a rental, or maybe it's just not an asset that ultimately is going to help support what I need for my next 5 to 10 years, depending on what your goals are. Exchange motives, conversion. This is a huge one for the next forever, because ultimately baby boomers are looking at options for how they can take some of their properties and convert them into something other than being a landlord and making cash flow, right? They've done things well, and they've done well with rentals, but they don't necessarily need the income or the appreciation from that asset anymore. In fact, what's more important to them might be something to do with time, family, friends, hobbies. So with that in mind, in 2008, the IRS created the revenue procedure 2008-16. Now in this, they essentially provided the blueprint for how you can qualify your second home into a 1031 exchange candidate, or more importantly, how you can convert your rental into a second home tax deferred. So primary requirements per the IRS, own the asset for at least 2 years prior to an exchange, right? So you have to own the property, whether it's your rental or your second home, and have had it for at least 2 years. Rented for at least 14 days at fair market value. So in this example, if it's a second home, you decide, okay, we're going to rent this property out for 14 days out of the year. Maybe it happens to be a family member or friend at fair market for 2 years. And then we're going to 1031 into an actual bona fide investment property. Or we're going to take our rental property, right, and we're going to convert it into our second home. So this works both ways. But naturally, the one that's most valued for a lot of people in today's market is taking the rental property and converting it into a second home or their forever home. So the last thing is making sure that the property was not used for personal purposes for more than 14 days or 10% of the rental period, right? So it's very generous as far as what you can do to qualify your property into a forever home or to get your second home into production for rental. In this case study, fresh dirt to Fallbrook. So in this case, Guy and Amy held 3 parcels of dirt here in Erie, Colorado, and some expensive dirt, might I say, as they sold the 3 parcels for $1.37 million. At that point in life, their situation was that the land was not something they were going to develop anymore, right? And their son was here in San Diego and had their first grandkid. So naturally, as I talk about the season of investing in life, their motivations changed, right? And so they're able to take the parcels of land they held in Erie, Colorado, sell those, and reinvest into a detached property here in Fallbrook. Now, coincidentally, we're just upon almost 2 years since they've done that. So they'll actually be enjoying the property this holiday season while visiting their son and grandson, rather than going out and maybe mowing some lawn there in the middle of County Road in Erie, Colorado. So just a phenomenal opportunity for people to take assets that are not necessarily funding what their lifestyle is today or funding what they want, and converting that into an asset that really provides them what's important to them, which again, family, friends, hobbies, time, simplicity, right? They're not dealing with 3 tax bills every year. They're not dealing with maintaining the land. They're not dealing with paying money out of pocket for taxes. They're just enjoying a second home here in Fallbrook and spending time with family. So for this example, just think about, what do you currently own that may no longer be serving you today, or maybe that isn't really a motivation of you anymore as far as owning rental property. So a lot of opportunity in this space, and be sure to think about, well, if I did want to own a second home, where would that be and why? What would that look like, right? The opportunity is yours if you choose to take it. Exchange motivations, consolidation. Consolidation of properties. So consolidating multiple investment properties into one larger asset, such as a fourplex, apartment building, or maybe a commercial building, right? So a great example of this is someone who might own multiple condos or multiple detached homes. The benefit of consolidation is really the enhanced efficiency of management, right? You could have an opportunity to take 4 detached properties with 4 different property managers and 4 different online portals that you're logging into for your statements, and consolidate that into one property. Also, by doing so, reducing operating expenses. If you have one management company with multiple doors, you're likely to get a better rate as far as their services go. Secondly, from a cost standpoint of repairs and maintenance, rather than having 4 roofs, you have 1. So naturally, the cost of replacing that isn't going to be the same if it were replacing 4 roofs. Not to mention, you don't have to coordinate calling up 4 roofers or 4 plumbers or 12 plumbers to get 3 opinions on each one. It really helps consolidate responsibilities for management and for helping make more efficient operating expenses. Naturally, if you're improving your operating expense category, that also means you're improving your cash flow. And then also, really, a lot of times people look at this as a way to, yes, improve their position potentially, but oftentimes consolidate property for the point of simplification, right? I'm more interested in, yes, I still want to have real estate investments, yet I don't want to be spending the same length of time or commitment to time of managing these assets anymore. Or it's not as important to me anymore. I don't want to be an active investor as much as I am today. So using this as an opportunity to consolidate your responsibilities, get back time, and potentially create a more efficient rental investment asset. So a great easy example of this is Lillian and the two tired condos. So Lillian owned two rental properties here in the Adobe Falls area that she had for multiple decades, right? So at this point, the properties had no debt on them, they had zero basis, and well, they were tired, right? Lillian called us because she was dealing with management issues. One of the units had turned over and was trashed, and was trying to understand how she could better improve her situation and really simplify. So living in Idaho, Lillian didn't want to deal with the management of these condos being out of state. Additionally, she wanted to make it easy so that she could handle the property if needed, or when it came time, her son could easily take over the property because it was where they lived. In this example, we were able to help Lillian sell both of these tired condos, which might add also would have required at least $20,000 each in repairs, and convert that into a new construction property 15 minutes from her primary home in the Idaho area. In doing so, she simplified her responsibilities because she no longer has management companies. Her son is actually the one taking care of the property. Secondly, it also helped in the sense that it did help with her estate, in that when she does in fact give this property pass on through her estate, her son already lives in the area and could have the chance to move into the property as his primary residence. And then lastly, by buying this asset, she actually in fact increased her cash flow and was able to actually pull some money out of the exchange to put away in her savings account. So she was able to take two tired condos that were out of state and poorly managed in rough condition, sell those, 1031 exchange into brand new construction 15 minutes from her house, eliminate the headache with managing multiple properties, and help her son out with a legacy asset that he gets to enjoy is either a primary or an investment property down the road. Another great example of how you can take older assets and convert it into a newer asset, and how you can take multiple assets and convert them into one, right? The simplicity effect and the cost savings effect, coupled with her ability to have her son help, was a win-win-win. And this is really something that a lot of people should be considering, especially for properties that they had for a long time, right? Because they're going to come with more phone calls, more management, more maintenance, more turnover. So if you're looking for simplification, as far as maybe looking at something of a fourplex to an apartment building, or a detached home that you own in California, then you own one in Texas, and then you own one in Florida, right? Maybe you want to take all three of those, sell them, and buy one asset in a location in close proximity to you. There's a lot of options within this space. Exchange motivations, diversification. Diversification of properties is a practice of spreading investments across different asset types and markets for the purpose of reducing risk for a specific market segment, a geographic location, or maybe a particular asset type. So what this looks like is maybe you own commercial properties, right, that are located in an area that is not seeing high vacancy and a lot of companies are pulling out of. Well, in that case, you certainly wouldn't want to have all of your real estate being held in that commercial space. So in this instance, right, that could be a situation where a client sells that commercial and diversifies into a multifamily asset or a passive fund, or a multitude of both, right? Detached homes, fourplex. It's really being able to make sure you're not exposed to one particular location or type of asset per se, so that in the event something catastrophic happens, like a natural disaster, which very fitting, we're on the heels of a 1-year anniversary for Ian that struck near the Tampa Bay area of Florida, naturally you wouldn't want to have all your assets in that location, or you'd be out income for several years, I'd imagine. In this case, the purpose of diversification is to really insulate yourself as much as possible from economic downturns, to make sure that you're creating more of a mutual fund or portfolio effect. One of the examples I have here is if we show the appreciation rate in August of this year, we took the highest market appreciation rate in Miami at 8.9% and the lowest in Phoenix of negative 5.5. Now, if you were in Miami in August, that would be awesome, right? That would be an ideal outcome for you. And yet, if you were in Phoenix, not so much. Yet, if you had properties in both those locations, the cumulative effect would be that you'd both be at 3.4% positive, right? So instead of being at the top or the bottom, you'd be able to find yourself somewhere in the middle. And that really is what you find when you're in the portfolio effect of increasing your efficiencies with having properties that perform in different asset types or different market types, so that you can realize a more stable outcome year in and year out. Other examples of this would be San Diego. In June 24th of this year, we saw the Tenant Protections Act come into place. This is another situation where we don't have control of what government regulations come into play. And yet, if you owned all your assets here in San Diego, and you happen to be in that situation where these are properties that might be below market rent or need repairs, you're going to find yourself in a really sticky situation because of the new tenant protection acts are going to require a lot of time and money out of your pocket to get those things done. Now, if you own one asset here and other assets in a different location, naturally you wouldn't feel the impact of that as much had you owned all your properties here. So really what we're trying to accomplish here through the exchange is if there's an opportunity for you to stabilize or improve your risk from the market conditions, from maybe government responses, or even look at an example of insurance that we've seen here change dramatically in the past few years. They have redrawn the fire maps here in San Diego County. And what that means is that if your house is now in a fire location, your insurance costs could be twofold. So instead of spending $2,000 a month, you could be looking at $4,000. Very similar situation in Florida with insurance and obviously flooding. So understanding this practice of diversification is to help insulate you from situations like that. And naturally, the more assets you have and the longer you've owned them, the more stable environment that you're seeking, right, to eliminate surprises or volatility down the road. Exchange motivations: reduce management burdens. Now, people that are in this category are typically looking to simplify, right? Maybe they're not as motivated by cash flow anymore as far as a certain return. They're probably in that conversation of looking at how they can shift from being an active investor to a more passive investor. People in this category are, generally speaking, simplicity, and oftentimes they value their time more than any particular return they may be seeking. Usually this is because they're in a different season of the investment process. They've been invested for years, and they're no longer chasing a certain deal or project or income return. Really, they're trying to insulate their time in not dealing with tenants, toilets, trash, and all that kind of fun stuff with managers. Now, in doing so, consolidating multiple properties, right? We've talked about that one as far as consolidating. That could be one to help you reduce management. Transitioning to passive investments, right? So passive investments being, this could be a private fund, right? Where you're looking to exchange and hold an equity position to realize a return, much like a lender, so to speak. You could be looking at a DST fund, right? Where you're fractional ownership to own a larger asset. And in these cases, as the investor, your sole responsibility is to collect a check every month, right? You're not dealing with the management company. You're not dealing with tenants, repairs, issues with a lease. None of that stuff is present. Now, naturally, if you're going to trade in active management for passive, that's going to come at a trade-off of typically a lower return. It's going to be safer, but it's also require less of your time, and therefore time is money. The less time you commit, naturally, the less return you're getting. As it stands right now, a lot of the passive funds, depending on the space, DSTs are generally operating around 4% cash on cash. However, some of the private offerings available to you could be offering anywhere from 6 to 12%, depending on the deal and the opportunity. So it's important that you, if you're in this space, you're talking to people like myself that have a network, have people that have these types of private offerings that you can place money into. Outside of the management burdens, the example that I wanted to go over today really is focusing on the DST space. So the case study is from tenants to time. And what we mean by that is from spending your time dealing with tenants to getting your time back and not. And this particular case with Mr. and Mrs. Perez, they purchased this duplex property here in San Diego in 2000 for $150,000, smoking deal. Had long-term tenants in place, and Mr. Perez was self-managing this. So tenants have been there for many, many years. He had a relationship built with them, and naturally he was involved with the communication right each month. So in speaking to Mr. Perez, really it was, hey, I've got too much time. I have to deal with this property and managing it. It's got a lot of looming repairs that are coming up, right? And walking the property, we acknowledge there was some roofing that need to be replaced, plumbing that was cast iron, so that was going to have to be eventually replaced as well. Flooring, foundation. I mean, ultimately, we're looking at a lot of money going out of his pocket, and he was not in a place where spending money is where his head's at. It's making money, right? So in going through his options for the sale of the property, Mr. Perez acknowledged that the DST funds were a solution for him because his main motivation was to get his time back, right? He wanted to stay invested in real estate and generating passive returns. He did not want to be a part of the active management side anymore. So with that in mind, we were able to help Mr. Perez accomplish the sale of his duplex, and he was able to place money in 3 different DST funds, right? This is another good example of he's created a portfolio effect, right? He's diversified within the DST space. So as we have here on the slide, 2 active luxury senior apartment communities in Texas and an Amazon distribution warehouse in Georgia, right? So he was able to sell this property, reinvest all the equity into these 3 different funds, defer any tax implications. And the best part about this example is that through doing this reinvestment, Mr. Perez was able to actually generate twofold, so 2 times the amount of net operating income he was generating with the duplex. So just a moment to think about that. He went from an active manager to a passive manager, and he increased his net income for the performance of that property by twofold, by 100%. It's a great example of if you've got an asset that's got a lot of equity on it, right? This is a very common scenario in San Diego. Held the property for a while, got a huge equity position, and they're finding that they can actually generate the same return, if not better, in putting it into a DST or passive fund. Now, naturally, this isn't for everyone, but if you're someone who's in this space that is more interested in their time back for simplicity, doesn't want to deal with tenants and trash anymore, this is a great space for you to look in. And ultimately, you can find opportunities in the DST fund any week of the year. And so they're always available for you to inspect, get educated on, and decide if it might be something that meets your needs. Exchange motives, estate planning, optimizing your estate and transferring wealth to future generations without family disputes. This is a huge topic, again, within the baby boomer category of making sure you have an option and that you understand that you can do estate planning now rather than later. And ultimately, that tends to help you out in evaluating or eliminating disputes and issues amongst the siblings and family members. Some of the questions I have for you is, well, if you could bless your kids now, would you? Right? Do your kids all think and act the same? Do your heirs want to manage, maintain, or handle selling assets? Do you own the same number of properties as your heirs? as you have heirs rather, meaning, do I have 3 properties and I have 3 kids? Well, if you do, congratulations, that worked out well for you. But if you're like the rest of us, you probably don't have the same number of assets if you have kids. Additionally, your investments probably aren't all worth the same amount of money. So the question becomes, who gets what and why? Well, there arises the family dispute. This is a great example of how you can ultimately make changes and better your position by also improving your family's situation with your estate and how it will be handled upon you passing on. In this example, we're going through the deferred to the delight, right? So we were able to help Flora with her property here in Mira Mesa. And her situation was that she had been managing or had a manager locally, wasn't a very good one. And so she was really involved with the day-to-day and month-to-month of her rental properties. Now, Flora is located in Hawaii, so dealing with these properties was a stress for her. Additionally, she wanted to find out a way that she might be able to help her kids with her current investment properties and how that might help them in their current situation of owning real estate. So through this process, right, Flora had some tenants in the property that were vacating. As you can see here from the photos, the property needed quite a bit of work, right? Property needed new kitchen, bathrooms, windows, roofing, everything you could possibly imagine. And therefore, she was looking at repairs in excess of $60,000. Secondly, she was interested in owning something in Las Vegas. What was important to her was if I could use that property in Las Vegas in some capacity, or to be closer to my son, that is worth it. So we started evaluating what our options would be to sell this property and 1031 exchange into a property in the Las Vegas market. In doing that, we were able to identify that she had options for new construction in the same price bracket within 15 minutes of her son. So Flora was able to sell this deferred, maintained property, reinvest with the 1031 exchange into a brand new construction in Las Vegas. Now, the other part for that is Flora also wanted to simplify, right, her position of owning income property. In doing this change, she was able to sell that property, reinvest into a property that her son is now renting from her. So safe to say simplification there because she's the landlord and her tenant happens to be her son. Not going to have to worry about talking to him as far as a monthly payment goes or maintaining the property because ultimately that property will become his property. So now her son has an asset in Las Vegas that he can turn into his primary residence down the road. But as of current, he can enjoy the property and Flora can come visit him and enjoy the property rather than still owning a dilapidated deferred property here in Mira Mesa. So it's a great example of how she was able to take this current position in Mira Mesa that wasn't serving her anymore, convert it into an asset that helped her son with his current living arrangement, simplified her responsibilities for managing, and help provide the beneficiary the direct benefit when she does pass away. Additionally, she's in the process of helping plan with her daughter for relocating additional assets to Hawaii for her daughter to live in. So ultimately, big picture, she's going to be in a position where both of her kids own assets that they will both realize and inherit. And there will no longer be any consideration about the kids having to figure out, how do I sell property out of state? What's going on with the management companies? What kind of repairs are needed? And ultimately, who do I talk to or what do I do next with managing, maintaining, selling, what have you? Instead, there's nothing for them to do in that space anymore because they've already accomplished what the end game is for both parties. Just another great example of how taking action now ultimately is going to help put them in the best position later. And you have to ask yourself too, is there an opportunity right now where I can help bless one of my kids and ultimately in return bless myself with simplicity and the benefit of knowing I helped one of my kids out and I got to see how I helped them out. Exchange motives, use in profession, diversification into a business supporting property. This is a great category in the 1031 exchange space because most of us do not think this way or even know this option exists. In this example, given a doctor, right, they can use a 1031 exchange to sell a rental property and reinvest the proceeds into a property that aligns with their profession. So in this instance, they would acquire a medical building or office space that they could serve as their primary practice for their business. By expanding this investment into a business supporting property, he has the opportunity to grow that practice out, attract more patients, or enhance their service offerings, all while maintaining tax efficiency, right? So where might there be an opportunity for you in your business to convert where you might be paying rent into something that you own that you can pay yourself rent on? Another example could be speaking with another client. She owns a detached property that they inherited a long time ago, not really fond of being landlords, but she also happens to own a school, right? She facilitates a school here in San Diego. She does not own that building though. She's currently renting it. But she didn't understand and realize that she actually could sell her detached property, 1031 exchange, and buy a commercial asset that's functioning as a school. Coincidentally, there was a school right down the street that was for sale for her. So putting these dots together and realizing where might you have an opportunity to convert one of your rental properties into something you could buy that you could personally rent into. Much like myself as a real estate professional, right? Rather than paying rent for a building, I have the chance to buy an asset, maybe a mixed use asset where we have office space and rental units, and then pay myself rent. And safe to say, I'm going to be a good tenant to myself. So understand here, there's a lot of opportunity in this space. If you're currently in the active income earning years, for you to realize ownership of the building you might be renting, or for another opportunity, and also understanding from a cash flow return standpoint, right? We're changing the way we're thinking about this from, rather than collecting a rent every month, what will my ability to reinvest into an asset to buy for my business do for the growth of my business, right? If I'm able to grow my business out or acquire an asset I otherwise would not have been able to, it really expands your opportunity within that business and what you could offer within that business. And most people yet don't even know this is an option. So if you know someone who's in a professional business, please let them know about this. This is a tremendous opportunity for you to invest in your own business, which in excess might be better than your own current investment properties that you might have. The example we want to go over this is college kids to countertops. So the Cruzes had owned a townhouse here right by San Diego State University. It's something they'd owned for 30 plus years and had done really well for them over the years, right? Consistent rental in a great location. But tenants were getting ready to vacate. And again, the Cruzes were in a different phase in their life where they were more interested in how they might be able to help their kids rather than generating a certain return or more income on this rental property. So rather than spending money to get this property re-rented out, knowing that it's going to need new kitchen, flooring, bathrooms, painting, they were able to evaluate options to help their son and daughter-in-law with a purchase for a business. So rather than selling this property and 1031ing to another condo or townhouse, they had a tremendous opportunity to buy an old tire shop here in Kentucky, Louisville, and convert that into a kitchen countertop warehouse space for their son and daughter-in-law's new business, right? So they were able to convert a old tired townhouse rental that, quite frankly, they didn't need anymore for the purposes of income. And they were able to bless their kids with an opportunity for them to launch a new business with the countertop space. And ultimately, that was worth far more to them than collecting another rental check on this townhouse, right? Just a great example of another way where We talked about in the estate planning, right? The ability to bless your kids or someone else in your life that ultimately betters them, and that's worth more to you than a particular rent check or a cash flow statement. So another great example of how you can use your rental properties and find alternative ways in the business use space, right? Because we talked about 1031 exchange is the ability to sell and reinvest tax deferred for both income or business use properties. And this is a tremendous opportunity for you if you're in this space or you know someone that might be looking for an opportunity within owning an asset to help fund their business or your business. So where is there an opportunity that you might not have thought about where this might ultimately help you or help your kids or someone else you may know that ultimately is worth more to you in this current season of life? Okay, we've gone over a lot of great information today and going through the 1031 exchange motivators. And a quick recap of what we've covered today and some questions you might want to be asking yourself after going through this information. Naturally, one of the compelling things we found is that there's a lot of reasons why people conduct a 1031 exchange. Secondly, exchanges help defer taxes, but as you've seen these examples, in most cases, the motivation was in addition to saving taxes, right? So yes, exchanges help defer and mitigate tax liability, which naturally is a huge savings and benefit to us. But secondly, there's a lot of other financial and intrinsic benefits that come through the 1031 exchange product. Also want to ask yourself kind of what new considerations or opportunities may have come to you through this conversation, right? What type of investments or considerations or changes did you not know about before this call that you do know now that will help you understand or plan for taking action now or down the road? Also, I hope that through these case studies, it really helped you understand at a deeper level of what does this look like in reality, right? What are people actually doing? So I trust that these case studies help resonate this information so you can better understand what options and opportunities you have to 1031 exchange, whether it's in the near term or in the long term. The last thing I would leave you with is what problem or property are you currently delaying taking action on? As you can see from this call, every investor who chose to take action ultimately benefited by taking that action rather than not. So what are you delaying that ultimately will help you, your family, and your legacy within your investment portfolio? So thanks for joining our wealth call here in September with the Emerson Group. Before we part, quick reminder of how we can help here at the Emerson Group. We offer free asset performance tests. What's that? Well, it's understanding what your current pro forma and operation is of your rental property or properties, right? We want to understand what is our current operating income, what is our returns, and ultimately, how does that compare against current market opportunities? Secondly, through our Leisure Life Property Management company, we offer free rental property market analysis. So you can understand where am I currently at compared to the market, where are my opportunities to improve, and ultimately, what do I not know that I should know about the current rental market and the current rental rates? And then lastly, click the link on our YouTube channel, join, subscribe, so that you can access past and upcoming calls through our Emerson Group community. Outside of that, I'm wishing everyone a wonderful fall season ahead, and I trust that you'll be able to participate in our 8th annual food drive that we're starting today. So stay tuned for some more updates on that, and have a wealthy rest of your week. We look forward to catching up with you in October. Take care.